The Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office announced that it has completed both Wells' autopsy and toxicology report, but those results are going to stay sealed until the grand jury gets the case. And while the medical findings are off limits, we know Wells' family is doing everything they can to get other information. Nolan's mother, for example, subpoenaed Meta, Snapchat, TikTok, Life360, seeking his messages, photos, GPS data as she pushes for answers as to what happened to her son. What are they going to learn? I want to ask digital forensics analyst Morgan Wright to talk about this. Morgan, good to see you. I have a lot of questions. So first of all, if they get all these records, okay, assuming that the companies don't put up a legal fight, if they get everything they're looking for, best case scenario, what is that going to tell them about what happened to Nolan?
That's a good question, Jesse. The thing I would do is I would take all of that information, I would map it against the GPS we have from the boat, when it left, when it slowed down, when it sped back up, map that with the call, and then map all of the digital media and the time and date stamps and location to that. So you can kind of create like a kaleidoscope, just a compendium of things that show you the timeline. When were pictures taken? What kind of data is there? Was he seen on the island? Was he not? Was he seen on the boat? So, we don't know what we know until they get this information, but I would start with the timeline. I would map the call against the GPS location and then map the social media when you get it to that.
Will they know if information has been deleted from any of the apps from the phone and when it was deleted? Because if they can create a timeline, if he was no longer on the boat and he was on Horn Island, would they be able to know what was deleted and when it was deleted?
Yeah, there's a couple companies out there. One that a lot of people have heard about, Celebrite. They do do a lot of great work on digital forensics, extraction. So yeah, if as long as it hasn't been tampered with or people haven't gotten in there looking around, that's part of the problem, right? Anytime you go in there, you start changing the footprint of what that device was. You want it in the pristine state, but Celebrite could still an extraction like that could tell you what was there, and most of the time, depending on the operating system, who logged in and how, could tell you what was deleted, when it was deleted. That would give you some ideas if it was deleted. I'm not saying it was, but if it was, a Celebrite report could give you a lot of good facts.
There was news that came out that the family has also issued preservation notices to the family members of Nolan's friends, and I believe investigative agencies as well. My legal point of view, you're putting the pieces in place for a potential lawsuit. I've always wondered, if you go through the lawsuit route, you go through discovery, can they get answers that they may not get through the criminal investigation, the legal investigation, the law enforcement investigation? What kind of data could they get there, and how would that help them in their search for answers?
Well, look, first of all, the preservation notice, when I was a detective, we did the same thing too. It just says, don't delete the records, don't do anything. Spoilage is indication of guilt. I mean, that can be inferred in a court. So I think so far the families are all cooperating from what the record shows. So, and then what you would look at is look for communications, look for text messages, look for anything that shows contemporaneous texts or communications that might be tied with the disappearance of Nolan. When he disappeared, or was he seen? Did anybody say, I saw him? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can get. But when you do that, that's a civil suit, right? So you can get a lot of information in discovery in a civil suit, but the grand jury can get a lot more information because they have full subpoena power, including the toxicology, including the autopsy.
By the way, I love that our digital guy here almost froze. I mean, it seems almost ironic, but we're good. We got you, Morgan. I want to play you something. This was a big piece of news this week. So Nolan Wells' family hired an audio engineer to review this distress call that was made from the boat that day.
The last call Nolan Wells' mother expected to receive on the evening of July 4th never came. She waited to hear her son's voice. Instead, the line is filled with confusion, unfamiliar voices, and the kind of silence that changes a family forever. Before the conversation ended, one reality had already begun to settle in: her son was not coming home. Only hours earlier, Nolan had arrived on Horn Island, surrounded by friends, music, and the carefree excitement that often defines a summer holiday. By every account, he appeared happy, relaxed, and completely unaware that the day would end in tragedy. What happened after that remains one of the biggest unanswered questions in the entire investigation. He didn't simply disappear in the dramatic way crime stories often portray. His absence unfolded slowly, painfully, leaving those closest to him trapped between hope and fear. Then, 2 days later, the search came to a devastating end when Nolan's body was discovered along the shoreline. But instead of bringing answers, that discovery marked the beginning of a far more complicated mystery. As investigators started comparing witness accounts with the available evidence, cracks quickly began to appear. Timelines no longer aligned as neatly as they first seemed, statements raised additional questions instead of resolving them, and then there was the emergency call placed from the boat that carried Nolan to the island. That recording has become one of the most discussed pieces of evidence in the case. Amid the overlapping voices, panic, and background noise, listeners believe they can hear words and reactions that continue to divide public opinion. Some believe the audio supports the explanation already given, others argue it points towards something much more troubling. Long before many of the public questions surfaced, several people connected to the day's events had already retained legal representation. Investigators also faced growing scrutiny over missing digital evidence, including phone records that reportedly became difficult to recover. Then another startling issue emerged during an independent examination of Nolan's remains. According to the independent pathologist, key anatomical structures from the neck had been retained during the original autopsy, preventing a complete evaluation of certain possible causes of death. Rather than providing certainty, the second examination generated even more unanswered questions. While investigators continued their work, Nolan's mother remained relentless in her pursuit of answers, determined to understand exactly what happened to her son during those final hours. For her family, every new development has brought as many questions as it has hope. This case involves the death of a young man and an ongoing investigation that has raised difficult questions surrounding witness accounts, forensic findings, and the possibility of criminal conduct. We'll distinguish between verified evidence, official statements, witness claims, and unresolved allegations while treating Nolan, his loved ones, and the investigation with the respect they deserve. According to witness statements, sometime around 3 that afternoon, Trax and Shepard saw Nolan alive for what would become the final confirmed time. Nolan was sitting near the shoreline beside 19-year-old Katie McCormick, who had traveled to the island separately and was not part of the same boating group. Shepard later described the scene as calm and completely ordinary. Nolan appeared comfortable, there were no obvious signs of distress, and nothing about those few moments suggested they would soon become the final peaceful images anyone would have of him. Yet, within a remarkably short period, everything would change. What happened next centered on the boat itself. According to the group, the vessel had begun experiencing serious mechanical trouble. The bilge pump was no longer keeping up, water was entering the boat, and staying where they were was no longer an option. As concern spread among those on board, one of Nolan's friends reportedly began gathering everyone together. When he reached Nolan, witnesses said the request wasn't casual, it was repeated several times, each attempt carrying more urgency than the last. The message was simple, "We're leaving. If you're coming, get on the boat now." According to the friends who later spoke with investigators, Nolan declined. They said he responded that he planned to remain on Horn Island and would simply catch another boat back to the mainland later that day. In later interviews, members of the group explained that this wasn't viewed as unusual. On busy holiday weekends, people frequently arrived with one group and departed with another. From their perspective, Nolan's decision did not appear dangerous or out of the ordinary, so the boat left. But that isn't the only version of what happened. Katie McCormick, the last known person confirmed to have spoken with Nolan before he disappeared, painted a very different picture through comments later shared publicly by her sister, Gracie McCormick. According to Gracie, after Nolan and Katie finished talking near the shoreline, Nolan told Katie he intended to head back toward his friend's boat. He wasn't planning to remain on the island, he believed he was leaving. If that account is accurate, then Nolan's final intention was completely different from the one described by the boating group. Those two narratives cannot easily exist side by side. Either Nolan expected to stay behind, or he believed he was returning to the boat before it departed. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Kafender proposed another possibility. Rather than viewing the statements as mutually exclusive, she suggested they could reflect different moments in time. Under that interpretation, Nolan may have first told his friends he intended to remain on the island. Later, after speaking with Katie, he could have changed his mind and started walking back toward the boat, only to discover it had already departed. If that sequence is correct, neither witness would necessarily be providing false information. Both could simply be describing different decisions made minutes apart. It's a plausible explanation, but it's an interpretation rather than a confirmed fact. Dispatcher Vicky answered the emergency call and learned the boat was near the western end of Horn Island. The caller said the bilge pump had failed, the vessel was taking on water, and immediate assistance was needed. From the start, the call reflected a stressful emergency. Information came in fragments, the caller struggled to provide details, and communication briefly cut out before resuming. Despite the confusion, the dispatcher continued gathering information to coordinate a response. Later, investigators began asking what else might have been happening during that call. To many investigators, the recording did not sound staged. The caller's urgency, fragmented responses, and repeated instructions resembled a real emergency. The audio released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources became official evidence available to the public, and its release sparked widespread debate. Some listeners claimed they heard voices in the background mentioning Nolan, leading to speculation that he was still on the boat. If true, that would contradict the group's claim that Nolan remained on Horn Island after they left. Former law enforcement officer Brandon Tatum urged caution. He pointed to witness statements placing Nolan on the island after the boat departed, video footage where Nolan did not appear, and GPS data showing the vessel stayed close to Horn Island, among many other boats. In his view, a major incident on board would likely have been witnessed. Tatum also warned against reading too much into unclear background audio. With alarms, rushing water, and overlapping voices, people often hear familiar words that aren't actually there. To date, neither the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources nor the Jackson County Sheriff's Office has confirmed any interpretation of those voices. Investigators did, however, verify something more significant: the boat's GPS data. Authorities said the vessel did not leave Horn Island until about 4:30 p.m., a timeline that appeared inconsistent with parts of the group's earlier account. Sheriff John Ledbetter said investigators must determine why witness statements and GPS records differ, even if the gap is only a matter of minutes. The sheriff's office also requested original unedited photos and videos from anyone near the island's northwest side that day, specifically asking for footage showing any alleged altercations or images of Nolan Wells, suggesting the investigation had expanded beyond a routine missing person case. Meanwhile, Nolan's family searched desperately after he failed to return home on July 4th. As hours passed without answers, another troubling discovery emerged. Using a phone tracking app, they found Nolan's cell phone had already reached the mainland. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump later said the phone left the island with members of the boating group and was eventually recovered by one of Nolan's friends. Why Nolan's phone was no longer with him when it left the island and what investigators learned from it would become key questions in the case. When the phone was finally returned to Nolan's family, another issue quickly emerged. According to the family's legal team, messages had been deleted from Nolan's phone. Investigators have since worked to determine whether that missing data can be recovered. To ensure transparency, law enforcement and the Wells family's attorneys agreed to a joint forensic examination of the device so experts from both sides could review the findings independently. At the time of this recording, that analysis had not been completed. Attorney Ben Crump repeatedly raised one question: why would an 18-year-old stay alone on a remote barrier island without his cell phone, reliable communication, or a confirmed ride home? Horn Island has virtually no cell service, making communication extremely difficult. Crump argued that the known facts surrounding Nolan's phone deserve careful investigation. Another piece of evidence soon entered the public discussion. Crump's team obtained video recorded on Horn Island during the July 4th gathering. At a press conference, he said witnesses claimed the footage captured Nolan demanding his phone, allegedly shouting, "Give me my phone. What are you doing?" The claim spread rapidly online, but was soon challenged. Traxon Shepard said the voice belonged to him, not Nolan. According to Shepard, the video showed an unrelated fight involving another person. He said he was the one shouting while others restrained him, and although Nolan was nearby, he never appeared on camera. Another member of the group, Javon Williams, also said he did not believe the voice was Nolan's. As conflicting accounts emerged, Crump acknowledged the uncertainty and said his team would be more cautious until witness claims could be verified with additional evidence. Was Nolan involved in any physical confrontation on Horn Island? Investigators have never publicly answered that. However, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office specifically requested original photos and videos showing alleged altercations, indicating they considered the possibility during the investigation. Nolan never returned home on the night of July 4th. On the morning of July 6th, a U.S. park ranger discovered a body floating near Horn Island. The victim was identified as 18-year-old Nolan Zaxier Wells. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind reported that there were no immediately obvious signs of trauma or foul play during the initial examination. However, because of the unusual circumstances, he requested a full forensic autopsy by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office. The autopsy was conducted on July 7th, but at the time of this recording, the official findings remain pending while toxicology and other forensic testing are completed. Even before those results, investigators were rebuilding Nolan's final timeline. An internal Mississippi Department of Marine Resources document dated July 5 stated that witnesses reported Nolan had consumed a significant amount of alcohol and was last seen with an unidentified young woman. The document was only an operational search briefing, not a medical conclusion, but it showed investigators were already tracing his final movements. Meanwhile, Nolan's family decided not to wait. Within days of his recovery, they hired civil rights attorney Ben Crump. Having represented families in high-profile cases involving Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor, Crump's involvement signaled that the family intended to pursue independent answers alongside the official investigation. Ben Crump expanded the legal team by bringing in attorney Liza Park, while Eric Hers led the independent investigation in Mississippi. According to the attorneys, the public response was immediate. Investigators reportedly received 50 to 100 calls a day from people who had been on Horn Island or knew someone who was, suggesting many witnesses had yet to share what they knew. The legal team also moved quickly to preserve digital evidence, sending requests to technology companies to secure social media accounts, phone records, and electronic communications before any additional data could be altered or deleted. Crump and Nolan's family met with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath. Both sides described the meeting as productive. The district attorney confirmed that once investigators completed their work, the evidence would be presented to a grand jury to determine whether sufficient grounds exist for criminal charges. Federal authorities also became involved, though officials said the FBI's role has been limited mainly to investigating interstate threats rather than leading the death investigation. Tyler Perry quietly paid for Nolan's funeral held at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs on July 20th. Meanwhile, Colin Kaepernick's organization funded an independent forensic examination to provide the family with a second autopsy. As the investigation expanded, public debate intensified. Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves made comments that Crump publicly criticized, arguing they focused more on him than on the family's concerns. Questions also arose after reports that a case tip line was routed to the office of Judge Ashley Cole instead of the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Officials have never publicly explained that decision. The investigation also unfolded against Mississippi's long history of controversial cases involving the deaths of young black men. While many observers viewed the case through that historical lens, investigators continued to emphasize that evidence, not public opinion, would determine the outcome. For Nolan's family, independent scientific answers became the priority. A second autopsy was performed in Washington, D.C. by Dr. Roger A. Mitchell Jr., a nationally recognized forensic pathologist and former chief medical examiner. The findings were presented publicly on July 22 during the NAACP National Convention in Chicago. Standing beside Ben Crump, Nolan's parents prepared to share conclusions they believed could reshape public understanding of the case. When Dr. Mitchell presented the independent findings, the conclusion was notable for its caution. The reported cause and manner of death were listed as undetermined. Dr. Mitchell did not conclude that Nolan drowned or that he was a victim of homicide. Instead, he explained that the available evidence simply did not allow a definitive medical conclusion. According to his report, 3 major limitations prevented that determination. Condition of the body. During the original state examination on July 7, internal organs were removed as part of the normal forensic process. By the time Dr. Mitchell examined the remains, key organs used to evaluate drowning, particularly the lungs and airway, were no longer available in their original condition. Because of that, he could neither confirm nor rule out drowning, nor could he independently examine stomach contents for evidence of water ingestion. Missing neck structures. Dr. Mitchell reported that the trachea, laryngeal cartilage, thyroid horn, and hyoid bone were not included with the remains he received. Without those structures, he could not determine whether a neck injury contributed to Nolan's death. He did not conclude that such an injury occurred, only that it could not be ruled out. Decomposition and timing. By the second examination, Nolan's body had remained in the water, been recovered, refrigerated, and already undergone a full autopsy. Natural decomposition made bruising and other subtle injuries much harder to evaluate. Even with those limitations, Dr. Mitchell documented an area of red discoloration beneath the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. He found no skull fracture or laceration and did not identify its cause, leaving it as another unresolved observation. Other forensic experts noted that second autopsies often face these same challenges because key structures may no longer be available. Nearly 4 weeks after Nolan disappeared, several major questions remain. The official Mississippi State Medical Examiner's report has still not been released publicly, remaining pending while routine toxicology testing is completed. District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath confirmed the evidence will be presented to a grand jury after investigators complete their work. Authorities say they have already interviewed about 60 witnesses, with additional interviews still possible. The joint forensic examination of Nolan's cell phone has not yet produced public results. Investigators have not revealed what data was deleted when it disappeared, or who may have been responsible. Likewise, Dr. Mitchell's request for access to the state's findings regarding the missing neck structures has not received a public response from the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office. No arrests have been made, no criminal charges have been filed, and authorities have not publicly identified any suspects. Investigators also continue examining the boat's timeline, as Sheriff John Ledbetter acknowledged that GPS records appear to conflict with parts of the witness accounts describing when the vessel left Horn Island. Before Nolan Wells became national news, he was simply a young man preparing for his future. According to his family, the night before everything changed, Nolan cooked salmon for dinner, hugged his mother goodbye, and left home expecting to return. He had signed to continue his football career at the collegiate level, with a future filled with opportunity. On National Signing Day, Nolan spoke proudly about starting college alongside close friends and teammates. Those who knew him remembered far more than his athletic talent. Coach Jake Brumfield described him as deeply respected, friend Traxon Shepard remembered the energy he brought wherever he went, and his father, Elmore Wanley, spoke of his remarkable potential. That is the person who traveled to Horn Island on July 4, 2026, and never came home. Today, the investigation still contains more questions than answers. A GPS timeline investigators continue reviewing, a cell phone recovered without its owner containing deleted data, a distress call whose background audio remains disputed, conflicting accounts of Nolan's final moments, an independent autopsy unable to reach a definitive conclusion because key forensic evidence could not be re-examined, an unexplained area of discoloration on his skull, questions surrounding the handling of investigative tips, a grand jury still waiting to review the completed evidence, and an official state autopsy report that has yet to enter the public record. Through all of it, one constant has remained. Nolan's mother, Christine Wells Wanley, has continued to appear publicly, speak on behalf of her son, and advocate for answers. The family's legal team continues its own investigation as well, receiving information from witnesses and reviewing new leads. For now, a few facts stand uncontested. Nolan Zaxier Wells traveled to Horn Island on July 4, 2026. Witnesses reported seeing him alive that afternoon, including a confirmed sighting around 3 p.m. His body was discovered in the waters near Horn Island on the morning of July 6. Everything that happened between those two moments remains the subject of an active investigation.